This is easily one of the worst cartoons I've ever seen. It's repetitive, uncreative, predictable, and it's aged poorly with titles like The 12 Rapes of Christmas, or it generally tries to make you laugh at abuse and nothing more while never evolving. But suddenly, by the end, it turned itself into something way more interesting. A weird, cryptic, almost ARG-like story tied to creative burnout and YouTube algorithm shifts. But what even is this show? Overview, plus the Bedfellows evolution. Since this show is over 10 years old, you might be confused. Basically, this is an early to mid 2010s cartoon created by Chris Patrick, the same person that made Cat Ghosts. At some point it was a comic, but it got wiped off the internet and I can't find any of it left. The show is a comedy about two gay furries that are in some kind of one-sided open relationship, and really that's it, and it was horrendous. It's extremely repetitive, as the core joke of 19 out of the 35 episodes is something sexual, and when it's not, it's just mean-spirited. Episode 21's core joke is a character Sheen forcing Fatigue to suck him off, and 5's only joke is Sheen beating Fatigue with a chair.
Someone else in here also. Who is it?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Don't you talk to me like that. I would hate to have to beat your ass. Actually, I would love to beat your ass.
While Fatigue never deserves any of this treatment since he's shown as much as possible to be a good person. The only episodes that are actually funny and don't have anything to do with us laughing at abuse as a sole punchline or rape are 15 and 14. While other episodes that aren't sex joke or abuse related are just predictable or not that funny like 8, where even then the punchline is mean-spirited still. Finally, to get a real feel for the level of humor this show is at overall, we can look at episode 30. The joke of this one is that Sheen's mom is being racist to lizard people at a restaurant, so one of the lizard people sprays his green juice all over her food and she doesn't notice it, so she eats it anyway. The only people who'd actually find this funny are 14-year-olds, and overall, this is some of the most creativity and maturity that you'll ever get out of this show. It seems to just be a terrible, unfunny, random 2010s comedy that got somewhat popular for a bit, and if that was it, then this video wouldn't exist, or it'd be short. But years after its death, it changed majorly, with its only foreshadowing being a video that came out for the Bedfellows Frenzy Games teaser a year after the last episode of the series.
Hey there. Feeling any better?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry things have been so difficult lately.
Leave me alone.
I'm going out for a bit. I got a land to get to.
Whatever.
Gotta practice, you know?
While the specific moment of Sheen being abusive isn't as bad as previous comedic moments, it takes a more serious attitude as a comedic silly tone is completely stripped away. Sheen just sounds tired of Fatigue, even though it's clear that Fatigue wants to speak to him and make him feel better. Fatigue cares a lot about Sheen's well-being while Sheen just doesn't and wants him to go away. This laid the groundwork for what ended up being the most interesting era of Bedfellows that changed everything from the ground up. The art style, coloration, and animation is radically different and more simple. There's almost no dialogue throughout the entirety of it, and the jokes when they happen are more wholesome and chill as opposed to raunchy like the first half. This part of the show makes the relationship feel way less abusive, but it feels weird. In Computer, when Sheen sits by Fatigue, we see a fuzzy white outline as everything gets softer and Tex says, "Are you okay, Sheen?" In Salad, Fatigue cuts his hand up into some salad for Sheen, which Sheen doesn't eat, and in Shower, Sheen encounters a meaner looking version of himself that says, "You'll be back."
You'll be back. You always come back.
On the surface, it just seems like a nice quirky duo, but in reality, it feels like it's trying to tell us something. And by the final episode of this saga with Collect Call, we see that for some reason Sheen is the exact same. Instead of being the softer, simply grumpy and less abusive version of him we saw originally,
Boy, come on. Okay then. You asked for it, bitch. There. That'll teach you for being a little slut.
he talks of Fatigue like this.
Is a collect call from Travis County Correctional Facility.
Fatigue. Fatigue, are you there? Where the hell are you? I was supposed to be picked up 2 hours ago. Fatigue! Pick up the phone!
He's the exact same as he was before. The question of what's actually going on here is what makes this intriguing, because the show only gives you pieces in the original run to make your own conclusions, and I think that there are 3 reasonable ones that we can make. What does this mean? I'll speak on the first 2 most reasonable interpretations for what's going on here. First, that this is a symbolic retelling of how Fatigue wishes their relationship could have gone if they had just started over after he already left Sheen. I say this because of how different Sheen is in these shorts, as he never abuses Fatigue and he actually accepts being comforted by Fatigue, which is something he never does. His list of things to do in order to get better are all things Fatigue does regularly, even though Sheen's never shown to do anything like this, and throughout the series, he never shows this level of self-awareness to even have a list like this.
Well, you're gonna pay for that or not?
And I say this is a retelling of Fatigue's wishes for how they could have been if they started over, because on the list, one of the things he crossed over is the word start over. But even in this more hopeful dreamlike retelling that never actually happened, things still didn't go well and the reality of what happened previously creeps in. Sheen's still a total jerk to Gary, who was one of their friends that he scared in episode 8. Fatigue cuts up his own hand to give the Sheen in a salad, and Sheen doesn't appreciate it, which is a clear metaphor for Fatigue hurting himself with how much he cares about Sheen and Sheen not reciprocating. And with the shower episode, it shows that Fatigue knows that this change, if it actually happened, wouldn't be permanent. The fireworks episode, I think, points more towards this interpretation because Fatigue cries when Sheen becomes fireworks in the air and basically fades away since the relationship is already over, in terms of the real world outside of this dreamlike retelling. And the collect call points towards none of this actually happening because Sheen is the exact same as he was previously when he calls Fatigue while he's in the correctional facility. The second most reasonable way to see this is that these things did actually happen and we're just being shown it in a more symbolic or metaphorical way since they're memories. They restarted with Sheen attempting to be better by doing things Fatigue would do in order to show that he cared, but deep down he didn't actually change and reverted back into who he was when he encountered himself in the shower episode. Sure, he followed the list, but that didn't help with his anger issues or his attitude to others like Gary, or even opening up to Fatigue as we see in the computer episode, where Fatigue asks Sheen if something's wrong or accepting his help even when it's a detriment to him, like in the salad episode. Ultimately, he reverted back to his old self and was sent to the correctional facility by collect call, and Fatigue finally left him. There are a few other interpretations floating around for what this could mean given the context we learned in the series, like people believing that Sheen is in a coma or this is all happening in Sheen's head, though I don't think that either of these more common views on what's going on here makes sense. If Sheen was in a coma, how did he call Fatigue and collect call, and are we really to believe that he'd dream about failing to improve himself? And I don't think it's happening in Sheen's head or is some dream of Sheen's either, because he's shown to end up being the exact same guy by collect call. And again, I don't see Sheen dreaming about failing to improve himself. Without any historical context on the creation of this series, it just makes more sense to see this through the perspective of Fatigue, a person who thought of him in the best possible light, or as us seeing memories of what really happened and his ultimate failure as opposed to anything from Sheen's perspective, even if computer and shower are Sheen focused. But notice what I said, without any historical context. These are the most reasonable interpretations. I believe that the history and creation process of how the show even got here is important for the third interpretation, so I want to get into a Bedfellows historical recap. The Bedfellows started off as a series named The Panhandlers back in 2007.
Bonnie, what the hell are you doing?
I'm jumping into your clothes. What does it look like I'm doing?
It wasn't raunchy at all, as it was just about two friends who live with each other, but according to Chris Patrick himself in the Bedfellows ending stream, nobody liked it, and so it was quickly scrapped.
We were working on another show called The Panhandlers, and it was absolutely not going anywhere. It was not funny, and everybody hated it.
Though the design of Mile was recycled into the Bedfellows for the secondary character, who appears in a few episodes of the show like Bros Will Be Bros, which is pretty cool. After Panhandlers, Chris reinvented the idea with two other OC characters and made it raunchier instead in the form of a comic, though this comic has been deleted online and I can't find it. People really enjoyed this comic, which was said to be pretty different from the show, and in 2012, the Bedfellows cartoon came out and people really liked it. It was animated by Chris and it had great voice actors like Sean Chiplock, who voiced most characters like Sheen, Fatigue, and Gary, with other people working on it as well.
How are you doing?
Why is there a dead thing on my carpet?
And this is when it began taking off. As it began making them money, and the ambitions with the series grew larger, Chris sold plushies of the characters' heads and he wanted it syndicated, so he attempted to get it on streaming services like Netflix or on TV channels like Adult Swim. But out of the tons of companies they reached out to, none of them took their show except for Mondo Media.
It's like, I see a lot of people saying, sell it to this company, sell it to that company.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody wants this fucking show.
It's true.
Like, you have to
I personally sent a DM to Netflix and they never
Nobody
responded.
wants this
I
fucking
sent
show.
it to Adult Swim. We sent it to Comedy
This show is
Central.
untouchable.
We've literally sent it to those people, and none have wanted it.
By now it was 2013, a year into the show's existence and its emerging fan base, and the time where Mondo Media was at its highest point of success. Happy Tree Friends was mainstream, and Dick Figures was extremely successful, as this is the year where the movie for that series came out. This was a perfect time for the Bedfellows to be pushed out by Mondo, since it had such massive influence online, and in this year their contract started. Mondo pushed Bedfellows out as hard as it could, but it didn't stick with the fanbase of Mondo, and the contract ended before it could amount to much. Nonetheless, on its YouTube channel, it continued to be pretty successful, but issues began arising with Bedfellows monetarily by 2014, as we can see from their now deleted Patreon advertising video.
Look, I'm going to level with you. YouTube revenue has dropped to a point where we can't afford to continue animating the Bedfellows. So we started a Patreon as an option to keep the show going. Click it. There it is. Right there. If just a fraction of you guys donated $1 per episode, we could easily produce a video per week.
By 2015, they're taking an actual hit with YouTube's heavy shift towards prioritizing watch time. This hurt all animators on YouTube, and Bedfellows was no exception since most episodes were around 2 minutes long. And by the 2016 apocalypse, which is when YouTube began restricting monetization on certain videos if they were too offensive, every single video they had was demonetized, which was really just a big nail in the coffin since in early 2016, the last episode of Bedfellows came out. While the show was on its deathbed, the creators still tried to do many things to bring it back to life while also saving money. The last 2 episodes saw a shift from 2D to 3D in order to save money and time. In 2017, the Bedfellows Frenzy game came out, and in 2018 with Bedfellow Bits, or Back in the Sack, they changed the animation style while intending to go in a different direction, as a creator on Tumblr said. New designs for the characters and hints to a deeper storyline were discussed during the months following the completion of the original series. They even wanted to make a Let's Play channel with Sheen and Fatigue as VTuber models, but like the previous ideas, they didn't work. Chris didn't like how the 3D animation looked, the game flopped and received mixed reviews, and Back in the Sack only got 2 episodes and was taken off YouTube. And even the VTuber idea was scrapped extremely quickly. Chris realized by 2018 that it was over, and not only that, but he was also tired of working on the Bedfellows and it wasn't worth it. He didn't have the time anymore, he wasn't being paid, no studio wanted it, and he was burnt out since, if we count the Panhandlers, he's been working on it for 11 years by that point. He decided to move on to other projects like Cat Ghost, but finally in a January 9th, 2019 livestream, he announced that there will be absolutely no more Bedfellows content. He was officially done and felt like the series drifted into directions he regretted going into.
One thing I actually feel like I owe an apology for was the Bedfellows kind of went a direction that I'm not happy with. It became too much about shock humor.
What was the thought process on the 12 Rapes of Christmas? Oh look, somebody was brave enough to say it.
I just wanted to shock people, really.
That's pretty much what
That's
it was.
really all the whole thing is about shocking people. I wanted to try and get banned from YouTube.
That's how the Bedfellows first era ended, and almost a year later, Cat Ghost also ended on December 9th, 2019. But by January 24th, 2020, he began the second act of Bedfellows. This is basically an abridged version of what happened, but the history is so interesting because it's a story of burnout, overworking yourself, and how grand aspirations and feelings for a creative project can shift and eventually turn sour as you outgrow them while they stay the same. It's a story of moving on, and that's why I think that if we incorporated all of this history into what Act 2 of the Bedfellows is trying to say, then it makes the most interesting, meta and sensible interpretation. The creator relationship with the show. When you look at the history of the show and everything that led up to its brief 2020 revival, you can take an even more metaphorical understanding as to what it's trying to say. Bedfellows at its core never changed throughout the years despite its many surface level ones. Motion comics, the game, the eternal stay on YouTube, and the humor all stayed the same and never evolved even if it felt different. And by the end, the creator was burnt out and working on the series became a detriment after over a decade of sticking with it. With that context, it's easy to see Fatigue as a creator or Chris, and Sheen as the Bedfellows itself. In Salad, Chris is hurting himself to save a series that just isn't doing anything for him, like how Fatigue does to save a relationship that won't work with Sheen. With Fireworks, Chris watches as he lets go of his creation, but he misses it, which is symbolized by Fatigue crying. In Shower, when Sheen's other half says that he'll be back, is him telling himself that he'll just come back to it no matter what, even after he already moved on with Cat Ghost. And we even see this with the third act after this odd part of the series. And the computer episode represents Bedfellows' continual failure. Chris asks it, "Are you okay?" because he's already attempted to save the series multiple times and wanted it to succeed, and even this entirely different way of portraying the stories acknowledge and Sprout as Sheen already crossed out starting over. Chris started over with the series, but it still basically had the same effect on him. And by Collect Call, we realize that even in 2020, the show at its core is the same, and Chris's relationship with it hasn't changed. It's abusive because if Chris continued working on it, he'd just lose time and money on a project he's no longer passionate about. So even though he cares about it, and the thought of the series echoes in his mind, he left it, because, like Fatigue and Sheen's relationship, no amount of reinventing or changing can really make it successful. A more metaphorical interpretation to this whole thing makes it feel so much larger than what it seems to be on the surface. It's not just what Fatigue wished could have happened between him and Sheen, or Sheen in a coma or anything else. It's an ultimate goodbye letter. Fatigue or Chris has completely left the series in the correctional facility to wait for the bus home, or for someone else to pick up Bedfellows if they so choose, as he says in his live stream.
If someone wants to like make their own Bedfellows show, I'm not gonna chase them down and
Hell
say,
no.
"Hey fucker, give me my." Well, maybe if you make like $1 million, I'm gonna be like, "Where's my fucking cut of the?"
Where's my cut of the check?
Conclusion. While The Bedfellows for the most part is just a terrible 2010s animated furry series, the second act and its history are what really drew me into taking it seriously. If you disagreed with my take on the show or my interpretations, or if you want to add some info and your own understanding for what happened, and maybe some more history I missed, then leave a comment. Hope you enjoyed this shorter experimental video, and I'll see you all in whatever I post next.